And thanks to our friends on the 5. Welcome to Hannity. And this is a Fox News alert. President Trump and his family hit back hard against the former FBI Director J. Edgar Comey. The president tweeting out earlier today, I believe James Comey and his leaks will be far more prevalent than anyone ever thought possible. Totally illegal, ? Very cowardly. And earlier today, Ivanka Trump said her father feels vindicated by Comey's testimony. Let's take a look.
What did you think? What do you think came out of that? Where did you watch it? What do you think emerged?
Well, my father felt very vindicated in all the statements that he's been making and feels incredibly optimistic.
And we'll have a lot more on that later in the show. Joining us, Jay Sekulow, Greg Jarrett, Mike Huckabee, Geraldo Rivera, Dr. Ben Carson. Also, Sarah Carter from Circa.com has a major breaking news story about Loretta Lynch and James Comey. But first, the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is now turning into a witch hunt. It needs to be shut down immediately. We'll explain in tonight's opening monologue. All right, here on this program, we have been telling you something, well, very few in the mainstream media will, how the FBI Director, James Comey, is nothing more than a calculating, cunning, partisan political hack who has thrived in the D.C. swamp. Now, tonight we're going to expose his relationship to the special counsel that he wanted so desperately that he leaked to the New York Times, and that is Robert Mueller, and we'll explain why this investigation is nothing more than a witch hunt that is aimed to take down the President of the United States. There is also a massive double standard that is being completely ignored here, and it's something the mainstream media won't tell you about. We will do their job. Now, during his testimony last week, the former FBI Director, J. Edgar Comey, he revealed that President Trump was never under investigation, that there was no obstruction of justice, and that the media was lying to you about the Russia collusion, Trump collusion conspiracy theories that they have been pushing now for almost 10 months. Now, Comey also admitted that he's, well, no other way to say it, kind of a coward. Take a look.
Maybe if I were stronger, I would have. I was so stunned by the conversation that I just took it in. Again, maybe other people would be stronger in that circumstance, but that's how I conducted myself. It was kind of a slightly cowardly way of trying to avoid telling him we're not going to do that.
Cowardly? Maybe if I was stronger? So Comey's excuse for not standing up to the president during these alleged conversations is that he's basically the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz and too scared? Now, if Comey thought what he says happened was wrong, then guess what? He had a moral and, more importantly, a legal obligation to come forward and report this. By not doing so, and we're putting the law up on the side of the screen, 18 U.S. Code 4, he may have broken the law. Now, that's just the beginning of Comey's potential legal troubles. Now, during last week's hearing, well, and this part is stunning, Comey admitted that he intentionally gave his memo to his friend that works at Columbia University to be leaked to the press, hoping it would lead to his special counsel, his friend. Watch this.
Did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes.
And to whom did you show copies?
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
And was that Mr. Wittes?
No.
Who was that?
A good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School.
By the way, the tape issue, whether it's there or not there, a brilliant move by President Trump. Now, what Comey is admitting to under oath cannot be overlooked here or understated. His end goal was the appointment of this special counsel, which just so happens to turn out to be his longtime friend, Robert Mueller. Now, we're going to dive into that massive conflict of interest in just a second, but let's continue with Comey having his friend leak information in the New York Times. By doing that, Comey could be putting himself, again, in serious legal trouble. Now, we're putting up the pertinent parts of 18 U.S. Code 641 on the side of your screen. If those memos were classified, which, by the way, we believe they are, and several legal experts are arguing they are, Comey may have broken the law. By the way, it's government property. And by the way, it's also likely that Comey created those memos on government computers in a government truck, making it property of the U.S. government, not James Comey. In addition to that, there are non-disclosure agreements that the FBI rules that exist that James Comey also could have violated. And also tonight, James Comey's relationship with the special counsel, Robert Mueller, is a massive conflict of interest. It's why it is time to now shut down this political witch hunt that is really aimed at stopping the president, delegitimizing him, and hopefully, in the minds of some, making sure he gets thrown out of office. That's that serious. Now, let's look at the facts here for a second. You have James Comey, who told Congress he wanted to get a special counsel, and guess what? When it happened, it was his longtime friend, Robert Mueller, was named to lead the investigation. And Fox News reported last week that Comey's testimony was, quote, closely coordinated with Robert Mueller and the special counsel. So you have a guy, Comey, who is beyond disgruntled and angry after being fired by the president, and now one of Comey's closest friends is leading the investigation as the special counsel. Now, I don't care if you're left, right, Republican, Democrat. Does that sound fair, honest, objective to you? Of course not. And at this point, by the way, it's the president's word versus Comey's. So who do you think Mueller's going to side with? It's why our colleague and friend Greg Jarrett, who will be joining us in just a moment, will explain a lot more, is calling out what is an obvious conflict of interest. Now, according to Greg, Comey and Mueller's relationship may violate, in fact, 2 federal laws. Here's the first one, and you can just read it there on the side of your screen. Disqualification arising from personal or political relationship, which seems to perfectly define what is going on here with Comey and Mueller. And there's another part of the law right there. You can see it, the conduct and accountability part, which basically says the Attorney General can fire a special counsel if he has a conflict of interest. And if that's not bad enough, then there's this from thehill.com. 4 members of Mueller's team have donated to Democrats. Oh, imagine if conservatives tried to do this, Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. This is beyond now ridiculous, and another reason why this special counsel, Mueller, needs to be shut down immediately, on top of the fact that we know there's no collusion. You, the American people, should be outraged tonight that your hard-earned tax dollars are funding this political witch hunt. And finally tonight, there is a massive double standard when it comes to how James Comey handling of what he literally said happened with President Trump, and how he handled, and you compare and contrast how he handled Hillary Clinton's investigation. You cannot investigate this, look at this in a bubble. You got to look at his entire past handling of controversial matters. If you start with Comey testifying that the former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch tried to influence the FBI's Clinton email investigation. Wow, what an admission. Look at this.
The Clinton campaign at the time was using all kinds of euphemisms, security review, matters, things like that, for what was going on. We were getting to a place where the Attorney General and I were both going to have to testify and talk publicly about it. And I wanted to know, was she going to authorize us to confirm we had an investigation? And she said, yes, but don't call it that, call it a matter. And I said, why would I do that? And she said, just call it a matter.
Not an investigation? No, it's a matter. And he listened to her. Well, that's a big scandal in all of this. You have President Obama's former Attorney General herself now needs to be investigated for potential obstruction of justice. Now, the special counsel should be focusing squarely on that, and perhaps Hillary Clinton's felonies that she committed, and not be conducting this whole witch hunt to go after the president. Not to mention, why did James Comey wait until his hearing last week to actually mention the fact that Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, tried to interfere with an FBI investigation? And also, since Lynch encouraged Comey to use language similar to what the Clinton campaign was using, well, isn't that collusion? Well, that's the real story here that Democrats, the media, apparently are not going to be willing to talk to you about. The real collusion going on is not with President Trump and the Russians. It appears to be between the Clinton campaign, the Obama administration, Loretta Lynch, and James Comey. Oh, by the way, what about that tarmac meeting that they had? The only laws that we know were broken were by Hillary Clinton. We'll put them up on the side of your screen. James Comey made the case against Clinton by revealing that she had top-secret, classified, special access program information on her server in a mom-and-pop shop bathroom closet, and then inexplicably let her off the hook. Now, Why did Comey do that? Was it because he was being pressured by Lynch and the Obama administration? And we also can't forget that he ignored the alleged pay-to-play scheme at the Clinton Foundation. You want a real Russian conspiracy? What about the Uranium One deal? Hillary Clinton signs a waiver approving 20% of America's uranium going to Vladimir Putin and the Russians, and everybody involved in that deal kicking back money to the Clinton Foundation. And Bill Clinton, he doubles his speaking fees in Moscow. Sounds like a Russia conspiracy. Now, joining us now from the American Center for Law and Justice, Chief Counsel, also now working with the President, Jay Sekulow, Sarah Carter with Circa.com, and Fox News host and former defense attorney Greg Jarrett. Greg, let me throw it to you. I have two columns with you, and they are spectacular. The latest one from today. Are Mueller and Comey now acting in concert as co-special counsel?
You have to wonder. I mean, first of all, the special counsel law specifically says that you may not serve as special counsel if you have a close personal relationship with a key pivotal witness. Comey is obviously that witness. They're close friends, close allies, close partners. They were joined at the hip at the FBI and the DOJ. So it's incomprehensible that Mueller was chosen, because in the end, if there is a case against the president for obstruction of justice, who is Mueller going to believe? His protege or the man who fired his protege?
Let me stay on the law. 18 U.S. Code 4, 18 U.S. Code 641. Now you're talking about working in concert. Then you go on to, you know, we brought up some other laws here.
Right.
Do you believe all of them warrant an independent investigation, and who should do it, and should Mueller now, because we know there's no collusion, be out?
The acting attorney general who appointed Mueller should fire him because he has a glaring conflict of interest.
He should disqualify himself.
He should. He should never have accepted the position to begin with. But I wouldn't expect Rod Rosenstein to now fire the guy he had just hired a short time ago. But an independent investigation is really what's needed, an open hearing for everything. That's the only way the American public can be assured the impartial due administration of justice.
Let me go to Jay. I'll put on your legal mind for just a second. Are all of those laws, in your view, relevant? And what about Mueller and Comey being best friends and intentionally leaking because he wanted a special counsel appointed? Voila, it turns out to be one of his best friends.
So, of course, any applicable law has to be looked at. But you raise a very interesting, and Greg raised this very interesting point, of when you have a witness that you have a close relationship with and not then being able to be the impartial special counsel. So what happens then? Does that really mean that James Comey's not a witness? Because, I mean, that could be one of the assertions here, which means the case against the president, which doesn't exist in the first place. And by the way, it was James Comey that said it. Let's not forget that the president was never under investigation, has not been under investigation, that James Comey testified in writing and under oath, and both of those are part of the record, that in fact there was no obstruction of justice with regard to the Russian investigation. And now you've got the situation with the special counsel and a friend of his who is the witness, James Comey, here, and you wonder, well, of course, does that just mean that there is no witness because there's no obstruction of justice? I think this goes back to the main point, and that what are we investigating here? What are the taxpayers spending here? And then take the second point, and this is James Comey's action as the FBI director. Here you had the director of the FBI taking contemporaneous notes on a government computer in his government vehicle, storing them in his government desk. And then after he's terminated, he decides to go to a friend of his who's a law professor at Columbia, leak it to the New York Times, who happens to publish it, and he admits under oath that, in fact, he did that because he wanted to see if that would draw a special counsel, and it did. So, you know, this isn't a Supreme Court case, which is what I'm usually doing. What is this? You ask yourself, what's the basis of this investigation? And as I've said from the beginning, I don't see it. This is, by the way, let's not forget, this has been going on. We're acting like this has started with the appointment of the special counsel. This is being reviewed for 9 months. And so far, no one that has testified has seen any evidence of any wrongdoing.
Let me go to your breaking news story tonight, Sarah Carter, which I think is blockbuster. And in it, you talk about James Comey on Thursday, alluding to another exchange with Loretta Lynch, where she ordered him not to refer, as we know, as an investigation, but as a matter. And he suggested that it smacked of political spin rather than something else. Take us to the next step.
Well, the next step is this. What we know is for months now, lawmakers have been briefed privately by Comey, sometimes in classified situations, and then those lawmakers would then brief other lawmakers on what was discussed. We know that lawmakers were briefed on a meeting that Director Comey, former Director Comey, had with Loretta Lynch, where he confronted her, not just about the tarmac, but about a sensitive piece of communication. It was a piece of communication between two political figures that basically alluded to the fact that Loretta Lynch was going to put the kibosh on any type of investigation against Hillary Clinton. And when he confronted her with that piece of evidence, she basically stared at him, and there was a long period, as he described it to lawmakers, a long period of steely silence. I thought that was really telling. Steely silence. And then she looked up at him and she asked him if there was nothing more he needed to say, then he should turn around and leave the office.
So she is basically saying she's covering for Hillary Clinton, in spite of James Comey, by the way, being very honest in terms of the standard. He even admitted that Hillary's handling was extremely careless. The legal standard is gross negligence.
Yes, and what was really interesting here is that she chose to say nothing. And the reason why he told lawmakers, according to the sources that we spoke with, the reason why he told lawmakers he'd have to talk about it in a classified setting is because of the evidence itself, how that evidence was verified.
And this came up last week when they went into closed session.
Correct. How it was verified and how it was obtained.
Wow.
So apparently this is verifiable information. It's just that the document itself is actually classified.
This is huge. We'll get reaction from Greg and Jay when we get back on this busy breaking news night. And also tonight, the Destroy Trump propaganda media has been pushing all these bizarre conspiracy theories about President Trump and his administration. Black Helicopter TV 24/7. We'll get reaction from Governor Mike Huckabee with the latest lowlights from one of the so-called journalists over at NBC, and also tonight.
There's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the intensity of this experience.
On Fox and Friends this morning, Ivanka Trump calls out the sheer viciousness in Washington, D.C. Geraldo will be here. Plus, the HUD Secretary, Dr. Ben Carson, joins us in studio. All right, as we continue now with Jay Sekulow, Sarah Carter, Greg Jarrett. All right, Jay, I'll go to you first. You just heard what Sarah Carter just broke on CircaNews.com. I am stunned, to say the least. Your reaction?
Well, look, I mean, think about this for a moment. We're now talking about, you know, what I call a faux investigation, a fake investigation, this whole Russian probe situation that's going on. And we now have evidence, and we've had evidence, and James Comey admitted this, that he was told to call something a matter. Or then in this particular case that Sarah was just talking about, he got the steely silence from the Attorney General of the United States.
She's covering for him. Isn't that what she's saying? She's covering for Hillary Clinton. Sarah, is that an accurate description?
She said matter. I mean, that tells you what it is. The FBI investigates. They don't do matters. They investigate.
Sarah,
I want to clarify this.
Yes.
Yeah, what he had was evidence between two political figures that basically said Lynch had agreed to put the kibosh, basically end any investigation or any indictment of Hillary, that she was going to be safe. And when he presented that to Loretta Lynch, she said nothing but asked him to leave. And that was the piece of evidence. Now, how they obtained and verified that evidence is classified because there's a long sequence of how that evidence was verified and the reason why it's classified.
All right, wait a minute. Greg,
that's why
I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead, finish.
Oh, no, that's the only reason why that piece of evidence remained classified and wasn't discussed publicly at the hearing.
Greg, that sounds like cover-up, law-breaking, serious
Well, if there's any obstruction of justice, that would be it. If that is true, you have to worry about hearsay, double hearsay, and so forth. My question would be...
But Sarah, don't we have a smoking gun with that before Greg finishes? Isn't there
well,
a
I
smoking
think it's
gun
definitely. I
corroboration?
definitely think it's enough smoke that, if the evidence is there, just like he says, allegedly, this is from lawmakers, senior lawmakers. If that evidence is there,
Right.
it needs to be followed up on.
Greg.
Well, we'll have to wait and see whether that evidence emerges. My question is, where's James Comey been? For a year, he has a duty under the law, if that happened with Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, to notify. He obviously can't go to DOJ. So the rules, the law says, you go to Congress. Was this the first time on Thursday that he went to Congress with this evidence and information? If it is, Loretta Lynch may have violated the law, and Comey as well.
Let me go, last answer. You know, when you think of Comey going up extreme carelessness versus gross negligence, Jay, we know the mom, and we know she mishandled classified information. We know she destroyed top secret classified special access program information. Both of those things are felonies. So now, based on Sarah's new information, where does this go, especially if that smoking gun exists?
Well, I mean, Dianne Feinstein said even when the address of the issue of when the Attorney General Loretta Lynch said to James Comey, call it a matter, just call it a matter, she said that needs to be investigated by judiciary. This is serious. So I think that, look, a new round of investigations could take place. And again, now it brings Loretta Lynch into it. And don't forget this. I'd like to finish with this. We talk about obstruction of justice. In the middle of the IRS targeting scandal, where the Department of Justice allegedly had an investigation, a criminal investigation going on to determine what was violated and whether there was a violation. I always called it a faux investigation also. But let me make this point. President Obama, while that investigation was pending, said there is not a smidgen of corruption. The investigation wasn't even complete. And nobody was screaming from the left that that was obstruction of justice.
I'm way behind. We're going to have all three of you back on all week because there's way too much ground to cover here. Great job, Greg, Jay, Sarah. Awesome breaking news. We're going to link it to my website, sarahhannity.com. And when we come back on this busy breaking news night tonight, this Monday night on Hannity.
What came apart this morning was that theory, because in two regards. The president said, according to the written testimony of Mr. Comey, go ahead and get anybody's satellites in my operation and nail them.
The Destroy Trump media, they love to push the Trump-Russia collusion narrative at every turn. Even Chris Matthews, he's talking about his colleagues, said it's out of steam. Up next, a brand new segment. We call it the Liberal Conspiracy Theorist. We get reaction from former Governor Mike Huckabee, and then later tonight.
There's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the intensity of this experience.
First daughter, Ivanka Trump, reacting to life in D.C. and the viciousness of the attacks against her and her family and what they're battling against. Geraldo joins us straight ahead.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright in New York. Here's what's happening. A suburban Philadelphia jury breaking for the night without reaching a verdict in the Bill Cosby sexual assault trial. The 79-year-old actor is accused of drugging and molesting a woman more than a decade ago. Dozens of women have accused Cosby of similar assaults, but this is the only case to result in a criminal charge. If convicted, Cosby could spend the rest of his life in prison. A friend of the president saying President Trump is considering terminating special counsel Robert Mueller. Newsmax CEO Chris Ruddy telling the PBS NewsHour, I think he's weighing that option. A White House official says Ruddy was speaking for himself, not for the president. Mueller is leading the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election and potential ties between Moscow and Trump's presidential campaign. That's a look at news this hour. I'm Kelly Wright. We take you back now to Hannity.
Welcome back to Hannity. Time for a brand new segment where we call out America's worst liberal conspiracy theorists. Now, of course, week after week, one of the most egregious offenders has been the Destroy Trump propaganda press. Now, right here on Hannity, we'll continue to shine a bright light on just how deranged the media in this country has become. And this is especially true over at NBC. Now, tonight we start in the minutes following James Comey's much anticipated testimony. Even Chris Matthews, you know, Mr. Thrill Up His Leg, made this shocking conclusion. Take a look.
The assumption of the critics of the president, of his pursuers, you might say, is that somewhere along the line in the last year, the president had something to do with colluding with the Russians, something to do with the helping hand, encouraging them, feeding their desire to affect the election in some way. Some role they played, some conversation he had with Michael Flynn or Paul Manafort or somewhere. And yet what came apart this morning was that theory, because in two regards. The president said, according to the written testimony of Mr. Comey, go ahead and get anybody's satellite to my operation and nail them. And then he also came across what was fascinating. Comey said that basically Flynn wasn't central to the Russia investigation.
Now, while Chris Matthews admits that the Trump-Russia collusion theories have fallen apart, he also references, if you paid close attention, the president's, quote, pursuers who have been pushing all of these ridiculous black helicopter conspiracies. So, who are the so-called pursuers? Well, Matthews, he needs to look no further than his colleague Rachel Maddow on the same network as probably NBC's top conspiracy theorist. For example, remember when Maddow speculated that Venezuelans were protesting on the streets because of Trump's FEC filing? Watch this.
Venezuelans are enraged anew by this brand new FEC filing from the White House. This is a country that should be a rich country, but people have literally been starving in Venezuela. Somehow in the midst of this incredible economic and political crisis in Venezuela, Venezuela's state-run oil company somewhere found $500,000 to donate to the very, very, very inexplicably overfunded Trump inauguration.
All right, wait a minute. I get it. If the dog bites, if the bee stings, if you're feeling sad, it's got to be Donald Trump's fault. It's pretty unbelievable. Now, there was also the time that Maddow theorized that Trump could be a gateway drug for the Ku Klux Klan. Really? Take a look.
A lot of people who I think are critical of Donald Trump generally look at praise like that from somebody like Donald Duke and wonder if he is a gateway drug, if there is something beyond Donald Trump himself that means a much greater transformation of the Republican Party into something that is going to be new to mainstream politics.
And Maddow, fully paranoid, also casually pushed the conspiracy theory that the Trump administration has turned America into a Saddam Hussein-style dictatorship. Really? Is he killing people like Saddam did? Watch this.
We have never thought of ourselves as a country where, like, Uday and Qusay get to be ministers of whatever they want, right? We don't think of ourselves as a ruling family kind of place, but now that's what we are.
Yeah, Uday and Qusay. Now, of course, Maddow has also pushed some pretty bizarre theories about members of the Trump administration, you know, like people like Vice President Pence. Listen to this totally false accusation. NBC News. Watch.
When the vice president-elect first ran for Congress, he ran on a platform that the government should take back all the money it was spending to combat HIV and AIDS, and the government should instead spend that money on curing people from being gay. Mike Pence ran for Congress saying, let's not try to cure AIDS.
Joining me now, former presidential candidate, governor of the great state of Arkansas, Governor Huckabee. Welcome back, Governor. All right, there you have, and I didn't even touch on in this case, because that could be a whole show, all the Russia-Trump collusion theories that were debunked. And I honestly don't know what to think. If this is CNN, this is NBC News, what do you make of what's happening here?
Well, Sean, if this is all they've got, they got nothing. And I mean, I think the one thing that we learned out of the Comey hearing was that there is no connection between Donald Trump and Russia. And we've been hearing that even from Democrats like Joe Manchin and Dianne Feinstein, who all said, we see no evidence of it. And Comey affirmed that and made it clear that Trump was not under any investigation. But there are people who cannot let it go. But they hate Donald Trump. And frankly, Sean, if Donald Trump ran into a burning building and grabbed 2 children and ran out of that burning building and saved them, the New York Times headline would read, Donald Trump runs from historic structure as it burns to the ground. That's how they would report the whole story. They're ignoring everything this president is doing, which is a lot, and all they're doing is focusing on a completely fake news, phony story because they've gone from being really a biased media to a corrupt media, and that's dangerous to this republic.
And the American people are now beginning to see it more than they ever have. But it doesn't matter he wasn't under investigation. It doesn't matter that there's no evidence of collusion. It doesn't matter. But for 10 months they have advanced a lie up to this point. Show me evidence, and I have all open mind, heart, and ears. But it doesn't exist as of now. And they spend night after night after night pushing a theory to what? Delegitimize the president, stop his agenda, maybe ultimately get him removed for office? Is this the power of the Hillary Clinton colluding media now?
Well, it's obvious that's all they've got, but I mean, there are some real questions that they could be raising if they were serious about it. Why did Loretta Lynch tell James Comey not to call the investigation an investigation and call it a matter? What were they talking about on the tarmac, Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch? Why didn't Hillary have any consequences for that unsecured server in her bathroom? And why no consequences for 33,000 emails deleted? I mean, there's a laundry list of things.
By the way,
that could
there
be
is a
done.
Russia
Why no
conspiracy,
prosecution
Governor?
for Lois Lerner, for heaven's sakes, and the IRS? There's so many abuses of government power, and this had nothing to do with Donald Trump. He wasn't president. Barack Obama was. There's some things to investigate, but it has nothing to do with Donald Trump or his people.
Governor, good to see you. Thank you. And up next tonight on this busy breaking news night.
There's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the intensity of this experience.
The first daughter, Ivanka Trump, says she was shocked at the viciousness directed at her father's administration. Geraldo Rivera has reaction. And also tonight, President Trump held his first full cabinet meeting today. Dr. Ben Carson was in the room. He will join us as we continue right here in studio.
And there's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the intensity of this experience. But this isn't supposed to be easy. My father and this administration intends to be transformative. And we want to do big, bold things.
All right, that was the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, on Fox and Friends this morning, talking about the sheer viciousness in terms of reaction to her father's administration. And the left-wing hatred for President Trump has once again reached a new low. The Public Theater in New York City is under fire. They got a production, Shakespeare in the Park, Julius Caesar, and it features the assassination of a Trump-like character. In response to the violence, several sponsors have now announced that they are pulling their sponsorship of this production. The Public Theater released a statement today defending the performance. It reads in part, quote, "Our production of Julius Caesar in no way advocates violence towards anyone." Joining us now with reaction, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. They're full of crap.
What a bunch of baloney. Really, that is obscene that they would deny exactly the point of this production. This production was built around the concept that it would be Donald Trump who gets assassinated as the Roman dictator Julius Caesar was assassinated. Et tu, Brute, the Shakespeare is a classic. And while you want artists to have great license, this is a lot like the theatrical version of Kathy Griffin. This is just like Kathy Griffin, the comedian, holding up the beheaded Donald Trump, the bloodied head of Donald Trump. This is exactly the same thing, only in a way it's even worse because they act it out. You actually see the homicide, the multiple stabbings and so forth.
And by the way,
and
they have a Melania
Trump
character in this too.
They have a Melania. It is so clear what the intent was here.
What would the reaction be if this were done to the Obamas?
Can you imagine? Can you? I said that when Kathy Griffin. Imagine if she was holding Barack Obama's head. Now, this also would generate an enormously negative response. You and I are against boycotts. We're against that kind of censorship. But really, I think that people, artists, if they take a chance and they fail, have to pay a price. And the price should be people should avoid this production.
Yeah, all right. And by the way, let's go to CNN. By the way, New York Times, Time Warner, they're all standing by this.
Because they hate the president. They hate the president. Ivanka is absolutely right. This is beyond the beyond. Barack Obama generated a lot of intense reactions and response. But unless you were on the real fringe, you weren't motivated by hate. It seems to me that a substantial percentage of the respectable folks on the left really do have an intense, hostile a hatred for Donald Trump that allows them to permit this kind of production.
Are you surprised if a conservative comes under fire, and recently me, or any of, there's never one single liberal that ever comes to a conservative defense, with two exceptions. Lanny Davis came to my defense, Ellen Ratner came to my defense, and I appreciate it.
What am I, Swiss cheese?
Well, no, you're not a liberal. I'm not calling, you're a Republican, so I'm calling you my friend and brother.
I am your brother.
So, but the point is, Bill Maher says the N-word. Don Imus says it off with his head. Now, I watched Bill Maher apologize. It seemed sincere to me. It seems like
he was rattled. I thought Bill Maher was rattled
too. I watched Michael Eric Dyson. I don't like his politics, and Ice Cube, I think it was. They gave him a hard time, rightly so. And he seemed to get it, which wouldn't have happened. And I thought Imus got it when he went to see the girls' Rutgers basketball team, and it seemed to change him profoundly.
I think Imus was beaten down. He clawed his way back, but it was not easy. The racial line, the racist line, is a tough one to come back from. It's like Michael Richards, the guy who played Kramer in Seinfeld.
Yeah, but no one went after Maher. They didn't.
Well, I'm not so sure of that.
The Soros Clinton group that goes after me,
it wasn't nearly as intense as if you had done it. Forget about it. They'd be picketing outside this building.
All right, Geraldo, good to see you, as always. And up next tonight on this busy breaking news night, straight ahead.
Never has there been a president, with few exceptions, in the case of FDR, he had a major depression to handle, who's passed more legislation, who's done more things than what we've done.
President Trump, he held his first full cabinet meeting today where he talked about enacting his agenda. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson, was in the room. He'll join us and give us, well, a front seat to what happened today.